So folks, look at you're all very welcome to tonight's workshop on coaching youths stroke adults. Some of you have been in last week on the coaching children. There's not a huge difference between them, I suppose. Hurling is hurling, camogie is camogie, the skills are the same. It's just really the level. So I'm delighted to be joined tonight by Kevin Kelly, Kevin and myself, and Damien Coleman. Kevin is the Ulster Hurling Development Manager. Some of you will know him, some of you might not. And Damien Coleman, the Connacht Hurling Development Manager, looks like he's sidelined tonight. No internet. So we'll be playing a two-man full forward line unless Damien arrives in. And Kevin is not looking good, I think. But look at you, maybe sometimes 14 can beat 50. And how do you feel yourself?
No, I'm feeling confident, Martin. The only thing I'm a wee bit worried about is I see Coleman coming along the sideline here shortly, and you give me the shepherd's crook and pull me off, and I'm setting the sideline then. So hopefully, hopefully I can do enough to warrant me starting place.
Yeah, but look at if the boys get enough ball into us, that's the problem. You know, we'll hang inside the 45 there, and look at if the boys get in enough ball, we'll be all right. But sure, if it's not coming in, we're gonna have to go out and look for it. All right.
That's grand.
So, folks, let's hope everything is working here now. I hope you're all able to see. You should be looking at Joe Canning there taking a line ball, folks. So, as you know, this is a live event as opposed to our usual teams meeting. That's due to numbers coming on. We got caught there a couple of weeks ago. We had a crowd outside the door and we couldn't get in. So you're restricted tonight to just a bit of texting, unfortunately. There's nothing we can do about that. So we'll have plenty of time at the end for any questions you want to pop in. But if you want to pop a few in during the meeting, pop them in there, and we might get a chance to address them. We might see them. Okay. Now, so let me see where we're at now. So many buttons here. Okay, so what we're trying to, I suppose tonight, folks, we're trying to bring a practical element to the workshop, even though we're at home in our sitting rooms. And we have a couple of little videos there. Let's hope they work. We asked you in advance to look over that video, just in case your internet doesn't work too well. Sometimes the videos don't travel too well, but last week our feedback was they were pretty okay, so hopefully we'll be able to talk a little bit about the videos. Anyhow, the questions, I suppose, that come up, you know, what do we do when we're coaching youths? What do we do when we're coaching adults? In my book, really, a coaching session with the youths to adults. With the children, my coaching session would normally be roughly half of it working on skills and the other half playing games. Now, with the youths and with the adults, I bring in an extra little bit, and it might be just 10 minutes some night. I just call it elements of the game. So some aspect of the game maybe that we feel we need to work on. We might put it out as a mini game or as a drill, you know, what matter, as something we're working on, and we might have several of those little bits, and hopefully when they all come together, we're playing a better game. Now that could be something as simple as players maybe not hooking or blocking. So we might develop some little bit of a mini game where it's all hooks and blocks or something like that, and work on it just to highlight it. It could be that our players are not maybe passing the ball enough, so we might organise a few little possession games that were hand passing only, and I might encourage the players to hand pass a little bit more. Because sometimes with hand passing, it's not just the person that has the ball. You know, okay, the person has the ball, has to be prepared to hand pass it, and they have to be able to hand pass it, but there has to be somebody to pass it to. And that's often the biggest element. Like Kevin is playing there and he has a ball and he's ready to pass it, but there's nobody running, there's nobody coming for it, and that can be something in a game that needs working on. So that's what I mean by elements of the game. Then it beats back then, folks, to, you know, what skills you're going to coach on a particular night. You know, over a period of sessions, how often are you going to look at those skills? How long are you going to do them for? So again, you know, I'm speaking in a way now as if I'm speaking to somebody that's new to coaching a youth team or an adults team. Obviously, most of you have quite a bit of experience on it, and maybe you're in tonight just maybe to pick up one or two little pointers, and that's fine. The elements of the play then, it's not that you won't necessarily do them every night, but I think they are important, because if you take something like let's say we're recommending the cornerback, well, all the players would just say the cornerback to get out in front of his or her opponent, and it's not happening. Now, if you leave it to the game, well, there might only 2 or 3 opportunities come in the game, whereas if you devise a little drill or a little mini game that's working on that, well, then your player can experience, getting out in front of their opponent maybe 10 or 15 times, and hopefully then when it comes to the game, that'll work for them. The types of games then that you're going to play, we'll discuss it in a while. Small-sided games, etc., etc., full-sided games. We'll talk about those in a moment. Now, so I think no matter what team you're training, let it be adult inter-county or let it be under 10s, hurling, camogie, I think it doesn't matter. It all boils back to looking at what we have now called the Magnificent Seven. And you've seen this before a few times, we hope. Otherwise known as the basics, but we like to call them essentials because these skills are just so important. And I think that your sessions should, broadly speaking, be based around those areas in no particular order: rising and catching, hooking and blocking, striking and hand passing, and of course first touch. Now, if you leave any of those out, you're training a team for 2 months and you've left any of those out, well, you're creating a problem for yourself. You're creating, I suppose, if it was a car, you're driving on 3 wheels. 1 wheel has a puncture. I was chatting to somebody on these last week and I said, will you ever see a golfer going out to play and leaving the putter at home or leaving the driver at home? Can they play the golf game? Of course they can, but will they play it to the same high degree? Well, I don't think so. I wouldn't like to be teeing off with a putter. Not that it probably wouldn't matter in my case, but you know what I'm talking about. Kevin, do you want to come in on those, just even to emphasise them at this point in time?
Yeah, Martin, I think in each of the webinars that you've delivered, the Magnificent Seven have been highlighted in all of them. And I think that's just due to how important and how key they are. And I think also as coaches, if we can, there's like terminology going about at the minute about like a game-based approach and games this and game. The game's great, but the game's not much crack if you're not able to complete these skills. And as you called them there, the essentials. So it's key that we try and encourage our players to be doing these in their own spare time in particular, and then that we're trying to look at them and highlight them within our sessions as we deliver them. And I think most of them can be, I think you can nearly get away within an adult session with covering them all, but then you might need to just top up on certain ones that maybe the players are lacking on or need a wee bit more practice on, as you mentioned.
Super, Kevin. Thanks a million from that. And, it's interesting. I got a call from an old friend who was a selector with me years ago with Kilkenny under-21s, and we're chatting, and he was saying to me, how he's finding in the last couple of years that very same things we're talking about here, that the basic skills, as he called them, are being neglected. And, he's being surprised that he's going to matches and finding players, not just under 10s or 12s, that they're just not competent on both sides for a start. And he'd be, like myself, he'd be a very, very strong, I suppose, supporter of ground hurling. And he mentioned the same, that it is disgraceful. He says, so many teams there and they're not working on these areas. So anyway, to moving on a little bit. So we take the 7 essentials there, folks, and when you read them, it's very easy to read them and very easy to read them quickly and to call them out there: rising and catching, hooking and blocking, striking, hand passing, and first touch. However, they're not as simple as that. We would challenge you tonight to look into each of those skills and analyse them further. And again, needless to say, we put this very same slide up on the Coaching Children workshop because it's the very same. It doesn't change. As the game is the same. So what we challenge you on that, and if you weren't on it, is to take the first one there, and it's not first for any particular reason, but we just take striking. There are so many different types of striking that if Kevin says to me, Martin, what are you going doing in training tomorrow night? And I say, sure, look, we start off with a bit of striking. And he say, yeah, go on. What do you mean? Continue. And I say, what is your striking? I say, striking is striking. But he might say to me, well, hang on a second. There are quite a few different types of striking, and they all need work. Now, I would start every single training session, I'd say, that I ever do with striking. But I will write down on my notes, various striking. That's the way I write it down, various striking. And on the note then, I'd have the different types of striking that I intend doing. So just to go through a few of them there. And this is just a little slide that we put up to, I suppose, encourage you to look at all the variations on each skill. And actually, we said to ourselves, you could do a lot worse than print off a sheet like that. Do up your own one, print it off. And each night you come back from training, just tick the little boxes of those skills that you have worked on, so that after a few weeks you can look back on it and say, I haven't done any one-handed jab lift. We haven't done any hand passing either. And very, very quickly you'll see where the glitches are in your training, and you see what you need to work on. So if we go back to striking and we say, right, straight away, I have it learned off at this stage. They're striking from the right, they're striking from the left. They're striking out of your hand, they're striking off the ground, they're striking overhead. They're striking a ball that's stationary, they're striking a ball that's moving. One that's moving towards you, one that's moving away from you. Not to mention the speed of the ball that's moving. Then the big question is, you that's striking, are you standing, or are you jogging, or are you sprinting? Because there's a huge difference. You know, many of us can strike fairly well from a standing position, but can we do it from the run? Can we do it sprinting? Huge difference. Then there's the question, if you're striking to a colleague, is your colleague standing, or jogging, or sprinting? Because again, there's a huge variation in that skill level. You'd say easy enough to strike to a colleague that's, let's say, 50 yards away. But if he or she is on the run, well, then can I strike it? Because I have to strike it then out in front of them, like shooting a duck. Because if I aim it for the person, by the time the ball gets across, he or she has gone 20 yards. And I haven't mentioned yet the distance. So how far can you strike both sides? You know, because that's hugely important. You think I'm a good striker, I'm meant to strike 30 metres right and left, which are 30 metres is not going to be good enough for a youth, not to mention an adult. So if we talk about an 18-year-old, a 20-year-old, you want to be able to strike that ball definitely 70 metres right or left. And the next thing then is, how accurate are you? Can you strike that ball that'll go between two poles 20 metres apart? That wouldn't be great. 10 metres apart? Well, that'll be reasonable, but it's not good enough. Can you strike that ball 10 out of 10 so it'll go between two poles 5 metres apart? And it's still not good enough for a match. You're looking for 2 metres apart, because if I'm striking to Kevin, if he's corner forward and I'm right half back, and he makes a run from the end line out the field, hand up looking for the ball, he's on the run, I'm on the run. I got to be able to put that ball diagonally across the field, that it will go within 2 metres of him, so that he is just to put the hand out and catch it. Now, anything short of that is giving our opponents a chance to get the ball. And it's funny, we hear so often now that teams want to play like Limerick. You know, whoever's All-Ireland champion, suddenly everybody wants to play like him. Now, apart from the fact that you can't play like Limerick unless you have, I suppose, 10 or 15 of them transferred to your club. The only people can play like Limerick are Limerick. Same with every other county. But anyway, meaning being that they want to be able to do all these things. But, you know, how many of us analyse, and I don't mean analyse in depth, how many of us look at Limerick or whatever? It can be Derry there, up from Kevin's county. It can be Antrim, it can be anywhere. And we say, well, can I strike that ball 80 yards 10 out of 10 times accurately? You know, that's what it comes back to. So you could go down through any of the other skills there as well, and you could say the very same from them. Hand passing, all the different types of hand passing, all the different types of rising, all the different types of catching, and are we working all of those into our sessions? Now, you will never have enough time to do them all. So you got to prioritize them. And that's, I suppose, where the bit of coaching comes in. That's where the bit of planning comes in. So planning your sessions, again, depending on the team you're working on. You know, you're working on a youth adults team. To be fair about it, it's not an under-8 team now where you can just throw them into the car, head on and play the old game. Under 10's the same. You don't need huge planning. You're dealing with now a minor team, an under 21 team, an under 20 team, or an adult team. Well, you want to be fairly well organised. You want to have a fair idea what you're figuring on doing for the season, roughly how often you're going to train, roughly how many games you're going to get, and then within all of that, what your training sessions are going to look like. Now, you certainly want to know what you're going to do a fortnight ahead, and you surely need to know how your nightly session is going to look, because if you don't, you're bluffing. And if you go down bluffing on the field, the players will find you out fairly quickly, and your session is going to fall apart. So planning does make sense. Now, I've said this before and I say it again. Strongly recommend that before you bring that session to the field, look at it from a player's perspective. You know, how often do we lose the head? Do we lose the run of ourselves as coaches? And we have all these drills and all these bits and pieces we want to do, and the players go home browned off. Is he ever going to play a game? You know, this stuff is nonsense. There's too many in the queue. There's a drill there and I'm waiting half the night to get a puck of a ball. So that's to be self-analytical or self-critical, I think makes a lot of sense. And looking at it from a player's perspective. That's just a bundle of notes that would, my sessions go on to bits of cards, and I'd have hundreds of them probably, right? That I can pick up one of them, fly out the door, and I know what I'm doing. Now, the advantage of having them written down is I can throw them out on the table some evening and say, right, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this, right, I do this now the next night. So it does help you in overall planning. The ones in the middle are larger because they include a little pitch layout. And the pitch layout is so that I'm not spending 10 minutes moving cones. I'm not spending 10 minutes stopping one part of the exercise and moving on to another one. And I have my pitch planned out. And I laminate those. And I'll have them for 20 years. And, you know, hurling 20 years ago, it was the same as hurling now. And it'll be the same in 20 years' time. The pitch is the same size. The only thing has changed is the ball. It's gone a bit lighter. So, you know, what's important today was important 20 years ago and will also be important in 20 years' time. Kevin, do you want to cut in there on any of that? We'll say the planning, you know, any thoughts you might have on it or how important any of it is, you think?
No, yeah, Martin, I think you've broken down there very well, and I don't think, you know, just what you've up in the slide there, I don't think it has to be complicated for coaches. I think that's a simple, good organisation that you've just put up there. And what I mean by that is, you know, coaches should be probably looking at going, how far away is my next game? So if it was pre-season or the beginning of the season, you might have a number of weeks or even a month or two to get ready for the game. So you can focus on what you need to be doing coming up to that. Once you're getting ready for the game, so you're the week off the match, you're probably going to focus in on a couple of different wee things to get ready for it. And the real must-dos that you need to get ready for that match, as soon as that match is done and dusted, it's probably trying to get recovered from that and get going again. And that'll come down to a number of things. That could be coming down to how often you're going to see your players. Are you training them once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week? Are some of them dual players, maybe focusing in with another code, like we're dealing with hurling here, but they could be playing football as well, or a bit of soccer or something like that. Or they might even be playing with their county team. So taking that into account as well. The good wee thing then that you said that, and it's only a couple of tips that I've been trying to use there, is coming up to your training sessions. It's like, I love your wee sheets there, so you know what you're going to be looking at. And to me as a coach, I'd be thinking to myself going, what are the 3 things that I would love to get done in the session tonight? And the first one being a must do. So if it all goes to fail and I only get this one thing done, this is the main thing I want to do. If I happen to get that done, the next thing would be a should do. So I've got my must do the should do. And then if you're lucky and you've got a bit of time at the end, or the boys have picked up on it a bit earlier, then you can just look on another one, say like a could do. So there's your 3 things. But if you don't get the could do done, I wouldn't be worrying about it. The most important thing is getting the must do done. The other wee thing then, just about, I was thinking there about your planning for your session, was we've probably moved away from all the codes. What did Damien call it? Landing airplanes, setting up the airport. So, but if you are going to use codes, it's probably best if you have the luxury and you can get on the field before your training session, set your session up and take the codes away rather than running around trying to set things up for yourself during the session. That would be my tip on it. But I think what you have up there is a really good thing. And the only other thing that comes into planning for me is reviewing. So I'm supposed to touch on that later on. But when you have your session over and you've seen what you got done, it's easy for you to sit there and go, look, this is what I'm going to plan for this week. And this is what I'm going to plan for this month. And this is what I'm going to plan for this season. But if it was me and another tip, it would be write it in pencil, because you're going to have to change it as it goes along. Because you might be planning this night to get so much done in striking. And by the end of the session, you haven't got it all done in striking because the session went in its own way. So then coming into your next session, you might be topping up a wee bit in that, or you might be leaving it for a couple of weeks to come back to it.
Kevin, super. Thanks a million for that. I like your do's there. I like in particular your must do. You know, folks, when you think about it, you plan out things and then the game is coming up or something is coming up. What is most important? And that's what has to be done. Kevin's last point there reminds me of, I suppose, a club meeting. You know, let's say you're the secretary or you're the chairperson of a club and you write down what you're planning to do when stuff comes up at a meeting, and you write it down in the minutes. And this is planning. Well, it keeps coming up in the minutes then until it's either done or you decide, look at this, it's not that important anyway, so we'll take it off. And it's the same with your coaching. You plan your year, your month, your week, and you put down, Kevin has there either could do's or should do's, and they keep coming up until such a time as you either decide to do them. Let's say it's hooking. Oh, we must do a bit of hooking. Hooking. You know, and it keeps coming up. But then we decide some night, Kevin and myself are over the team, and but sure, let's go do it and stop talking about it. Or else, if it's not that important, take it off of the list. So all plans are, as Kevin says there, you know, you can change a plan. I would change a plan going down in the car to train it some nights. I'd have it written down, and for some reason or other, I'll change it. And that's the beauty of having it written down. You know, you know in your head what's mapped out, and then you get your gut feeling comes, and even during the session, you might decide, no, I'll do something else. But it's like picking a team. That's grand. But then when you're looking at your substitutions and your possible substitutions, if you've gone through that with your management in detail, you know, what will we do if the full back goes? What will we do if the corner back goes? What will we do if the two of them are gone? You have gone through those possibilities in your mind. You've gone through it in advance of the game. Now, come the day of the game, if your full back is gone for some reason or other, well, straight away you've planned it and you know who's coming in. But you still might change it. You might at the last minute say, well, hold on, we changed our minds here. But the very fact that you have planned it means you've gone through the process. It doesn't stop you changing at the last minute either. And that's good. That's called gut feeling. And I would always say you go with your gut feeling. Okay, so coming back a little bit to planning. Now, I kind of hope you can't read this. I hope it's not big enough. But it's gone back a while, as you can see from the date, if you can see it. Anyway, it's gone back to 2004. And it was just to drive home the importance of planning. Now, you know, what you can do on the field is going to be, Kevin said there about depending on the time you have the pitch for a start when it comes to laying it out. You know, if you can't have a half an hour before training to lay out the pitch, well then you got to go to plan B and you want to have a bit of help. It depends on whether you have lights or whether you don't have lights. It depends on whether your matches are coming up. But this little bit here now is just what I would call a no detail 8-week planning. And it was very, very broad. And we didn't have the luxury of lights, and we still don't have the luxury of lights. We have a few kind of, if you want to call them street lights that we can see in the dark, but not enough to play a match or anything near a match. So basically at the time the team needed to be got fit. It was an adult team, and the plan, broadly speaking, was 3 sessions a week, Tuesday, Friday, Sunday. Now that in itself was the plan. And then it was subdivided. We'd say, right, on the Tuesdays, it's going to be fitness work. And the story, these guys are not in shape, so we're going to have to horse them a bit. Now, so the green represents the Tuesday nights, and this was going to be running. Anyway, you want to dress it up, it's still coming back to running and press-ups and whatever we could do, hardship, really. And within that, there'd be a sub-plan. There has to be a sub-plan. Now, just to give you a feeling on that, that could be the first week down, we're going to do 5 laps. The second week, we're going to do 7. The next week, we're going to do 9, and we're going to build that up to whatever. Now, I'm not saying we're going doing laps, and there's nothing wrong with laps. You know, people say years ago, oh, laps are gone. Well, sure. They're boring, that's for sure. Have they a place? Of course they have a place. But anyway, just for simplicity purposes, we'll say over an 8-week period, we were going to build up from 5 laps of the field every night to, we'll say, 20. Now, the Friday night then was going to be a little bit of a mixture. We were going to do a few circuits, whatever circuits we could do based on the light we had, and a few drills that we could do based on the light we had. And that was bringing a bit of variety, you know, even standing over a ball and trying to keep it from your opponent. That was a bit of a drill, and there was strength and conditioning to be worked into it as well. So there were the blue, and needless to say, there'd be a sub-plan for that we knew exactly what we were doing, what we could do. The Sundays then, needless to say, we had light. So they were totally dedicated to hurling. Now, within that, there had to be a sub-plan as well. Were there going to be in-house matches? Were there going to be challenge matches? Were there going to be a mixture of skill work and in-house matches? So again, that had to be worked out. So the point I'm making there is you have to have different types of plans. You have to have fairly broad ones, and then as you get in closer, they have to be fleshed out a lot better. Now, people often ask, what does a standard training session look like? Well, look at it, looks like whatever way you make it. And Kevin's session mightn't look like my session. And that's okay. That's grand. That's not to say there's no right way and there's no wrong way. But, you know, it is important for yourself to have an overview of how your sessions are going to look. So very, very broadly speaking, I'm saying there, an 80-minute session. For some reason or other, I like 90 minutes for adults. I'd be going around the hour for underage. So we'll say your minors, 20s, somewhere around 60, 70, 80 minutes. It doesn't really matter. And it does depend on the weather. And if you have a lovely summer's even, you might formally say, right, the session is over at 8 o'clock, but your lads, we can stay on for another hour pucking a few balls. There's nothing wrong with that either. So very, very broadly speaking, the first part of it, the 30 minutes on skill development. Again, I know exactly how that 30 minutes is going to be broken down. Striking and handling there for 10 minutes. Now, within that, what kind of striking are we doing tonight? Then we're going on to the lifting of the ball, the rising it, as we call it down here. 5 minutes for that. Hand passing for 5 minutes. What kind of hand passing? Is it just standing 5 yards away from each other? Or are we going to be 10 yards or 20 yards, or are we going to be on the run? So again, there's going to be a progression in that, needless to say. Hooking, blocking or tackling. I'm not going to do each of them. I won't have time. But I do hooking one night for 10 minutes. I do blocking the next for 10 minutes. I do tackling the next for 10 minutes. And, you know, there's your progression. Now, how you organise your session is going to be determined by how many players you have, needless to say. The game part of it then, again, how might that part look? Small-sided, maybe for 10 minutes. Maybe possession game for 10 minutes. Maybe full-sided then for 20 minutes. That wouldn't be too bad. One of those 10 minutes could be a component of the game that I mentioned earlier. You know, working on a particular skill that we're lacking in. Maybe we're not working hard. You know, maybe I'm a player, if the ball is thrown over my head, I'll go to the player that gets it. But if he throws it onto the next guy, I won't bother going to the second fella. So that has to be sorted. So you might devise a little game that might last for a minute where it's absolutely flat out and nobody can stop chasing. Now you can make those up yourself, no bother. Right. Some nights my game might be backs and forwards, and as I said, the component might be a specific element. My 70 minutes there, you know, all is allowed. Maybe 10 minutes for moving between exercises. You want to watch that as well. Now, there's nothing at all stopping you midstream, changing your mind in any part of it. I find the striking and handling is going well, I might do that for the whole 30 minutes. If I find it's not going well, maybe that's all the more reason for doing it for the whole 30 minutes, because if we can't strike and handle the ball, we're in a bit of trouble. But anyway, that's up to yourself. Kevin, do you want to throw in anything there? Would say, you know, with, you know, a broad session, how would you kind of break it up? Would you be similar? Would you have anything different maybe, or anything you want to try into the pot there?
No, it's good to hear, Martin, and I always love to hear how coaches break down their session, and seeing yours there, and it's good to see your maths. Being a former principal, your maths is still adding up there, so it's a lot better this session than it was last week. But just to say, I think, listen, again, it'll be down to the coaches to cut their cloth to sit. And what I mean by that is, you know, you down there in the bottom corner, and I think it's very important, you says 10 minutes might be lost to moving between exercises. I'm sure coaches on here understand even the amount of time that people are on the ball during games. You've probably seen the likes of Damien Young's stats and stuff like that there. And whenever you think about your own training session as a coach, whenever you're delivering it, you're probably thinking, I'm going to have these players flat to the mat for the full 80 minutes. And if you're standing talking to them for a good 20 minutes, well, you're already down to 60. And if they're doing an exercise and they maybe don't get the exercise or the activity, and you have to break that down again, then you can be down to 50 or 40 minutes, and you soon start to lose where it goes. And the two things that I would be saying there to take into consideration is number one, firstly, obviously, how much time your players are going to be active within the session. And obviously, the fitter they'll get, the more they should be able to do. Also, the other thing would be then, the second one would be how your players understand the activities. So say, Martin, you were taking me for a rising session, and I don't understand it. Well, it may take you a couple of minutes, 5 minutes to explain it, get us going, get us doing whatever you want. But see, the next time we come back to that, surely we'll be able to do that a bit faster the next time. So that'll allow you a bit more time to go on to something else. And then the last wee thing might be is how you've broke down there. So you'll turn around and you're going to play a game at some time within your session. But don't be afraid to stop the game and focus on the area that needs to be. So it might be something being that you're setting up your game and you're looking at, you mentioned earlier on, the crossfield ball, and you're working on it. And next of all, the players aren't getting it. Well, that might mean that you might have to break that down. It might not even be in that session. It could be the next session. Jesus, we'll start off the next session and we'll do a couple of wee exercises at the beginning, focusing on what I really mean by the crossfield ball, so that whenever we come to looking at it in the game again, that we're a wee bit more clued into what we're doing.
Super, Kevin. And, you know, just harping back on that point there, the players have to understand why you're doing things. And that comes right down to a drill. If you're doing a drill, if they don't understand why they're doing it, they're not going to do it at the intensity you want it. But if they understand, look, we're doing this because you got to get out in front of your man. If you don't, your opponent is going to win the ball and score it in the story. That's why we're doing this drill, to try and beat it into your head, Johnny or Mary or whatever, that you got to get out in front. Just on it again, that Kevin mentioned there, you know, time lost. Like that session that I have there would say, right, there's in the first 30 minutes, there's 1, 2, 3, there's 4 different exercises. Now, if I decide that I need to talk after each of those, normally when a coach starts talking, and hardly stop after 2 minutes. 2 minutes is not long passing, but if I talk for 2 minutes after each of those, that's 8 minutes lost for a start. And then I look in and let's say my game part is small-sided and then full-sided. That's 6 little items. So if I talk for 2 minutes after 6 items, that's 12 minutes gone out of the session, and that's a disaster. So we need to watch for that big time, that we don't talk too much And I know what you're saying there in your sitting rooms. Pity he wouldn't practice what he preaches. But look, it's different here when we're on this.
Martin, I've got a great question in here from Declan, and he's asking you, how do you manage the weaker players who may need that little extra bit of coaching to execute the skills? Do you simplify the skills? Do you take them aside? What would you do?
Yeah, well, I suppose, Kevin, that one came up big time last week on the coaching children one, where you're going to have a huge variation in skill level. And Damien Coleman, of course, came up with the modern words of bio-banding. But in all language, it was basically grouping your players according to ability. And in my experience, it kind of happens naturally on the field. The stronger players gravitate together and the middle players gravitate together. That's if there is a difference in them. And, you know, normally it's the newer players, the players that are newer to the game, they gravitate together. And if you don't group them, there's no learning. Like if I take, for example, in my club, the seniors and the juniors would train together. And you're looking at seniors where you might have a couple on the county panel or close enough to it. And then you'll have a few that are very close to it. And then you go right down to the tail end of your juniors. So there's going to be a fair difference in skill level, even within that session. So what normally happens is, if it's a drill, the lads fall into their groups according to their own level. And why? Because there's no point in me standing into a drill there with Jamie Callanan or Joe Canning or TJ Reid, because I'll be embarrassed with the amount of ball that I'm dropping. And the lads will be a little bit, they won't show it, but they'll be irate because I'm holding up the skill. So you get into a group that suits your own level, and then there's learning. Now, equally so, if you have players that, and you will have players that are deficient in some of the skills, you won't be able to, unless you have a lot of coaches. If you have plenty of help, yes, you might be able to get somebody to take a few of the players aside and do a little bit of, you know, a little bit of personal work with them. You might be able to do that. But if you're under pressure, there's only yourself and somebody else training the team, you mightn't be able to do that. But what you certainly will do and should do is hold back a few of those players and point out to them, look, here's what you need to do in your own time. You know, you got to work on that rising, you got to work on the striking, and do it in their own time, against the wall, down in ones or twos, etc., to try and come up to the level. Would you have a different take on that yourself, Kevin, or?
No, Martin, I think that's right. I think you mentioned a real key point there. It'll all come down to the help and support that you have along with you at that time. But then there might be a time in between that you might have to do a wee bit. Again, as much time as available to you, that you might have to do a bit of work with the player to help them along. Hopefully you can help them out. And I do believe what you said there is definitely answered Declan's question. Another wee question there, Martin, I'm not holding you up too much here, but it was about something you had before there about your planning thing. And it's from Ian Other here, just to say there's no name beside it. So somebody's not giving away their team formation or setup, but it's going down the lines of, would you ever send the players a pre-plan or idea of what you're going to cover in the training session?
No, I never have in my life sent them a pre-plan, no. No, I haven't actually, and I never even thought about it. What I have done, Kevin, is I've gone through maybe a drill or a skill or an exercise that we're going to do, and probably for the reason that you mentioned already, is that there won't be any time wasted on it. So if I had, I just say a new drill coming up, a drill for a purpose, I might. At a club meeting, I might, after a training session, I might stick it up on the wall, or I might walk through it in the dressing room and say, look, guys, we need to work on such a thing. Here's how we're going to do it. We're going doing this next week. I don't want 10 or 15 minutes wasted on the field showing you what to do. Here's what I'm doing, and here's how I want it done. I'll highlight that later on with a drill that we're putting up here. So, and another little point, and you made it there, Kevin, about the cones. I will use cones. Of course I use cones. And some people think they're being modern now and say, cones are gone. You know, that's just being bravo. Cones are not gone. Cones are very, very useful. And they're useful of course, for putting out boundaries if you're having small-sided games. But they're also very handy when you are doing drills, because it'll space the players out the way you want them. You know, if I want striking done at 20 metres apart, well, I can put cones 20 metres apart. If I want it done at 50, I can put them at 50. But by and large, I'd have a name on every drill. And after I put the cones out the first few nights, and after that then, when the lads know what I'm talking about, I don't bother with the cones because I don't need them. And it saves me bother, and it saves the lads bother picking them up, because I'll never pick up the cones. I always make the players pick them up, right? It's hard enough to put them out. And sometimes I won't even put them out. Sometimes I get the players to put them out. I say, right, put out cones there for such and such. But, you know, after a while, you might not need them. What I just want to mention there, Kevin, in case I haven't it somewhere else, is when it comes to the game, and I'd be very, very strong on playing a full side game in your training, right? In particular for youths and adults. Younger children would stick with the smaller sided games most of the time, but with your youths and adults, ultimately you're going out to play 15 a side, so you have to practice for that. However, you mightn't have 30 players in the field. So I would be very, very strong that, let's say we have only 20 players. I'd be very, very strong that the players are getting experience playing the full length of the pitch. Now, if we go with a full-size pitch, 10 a side, that's grand sometimes, and we get savage fitness work in there. However, there's a lot of room. So what I will do some nights, I have 20 players, which means I'm down a third of 30. So I'll pull in the sidelines 30 metres, 50 on each side. That's taking a third of the pitch off. So now your players have the full length. They can open the shoulders, absolutely hammer balls up and down the field. They're getting used to that, and they're working in the same confines as they would if it was a 50 on a side on a full pitch. Now, the next night then, instead of going full length, I want them getting practice going full width, because that's equally as important. So on that night then, I'll put a line of poles. I like the poles as opposed to the cones. Maybe whatever, a third of the field is gone, I'll take off whatever it takes, maybe 40 metres off it. And then I have my full lines. So I have my 3 on the full back line, a full forward line, etc. So the players playing down the field, right, the little drawback there is when they get as far as the poles, that's the end of their pitch. Obviously, they're only going to be stroking points over at the far end. Whereas the players playing up the field, well, that's normal. That's as if they're in a normal game. So that's the best we can do with small numbers. I like that. Have you any thoughts on that kind of stuff, Kevin?
The only one being, Martin, that I really think what you said there about the length of the field. A lot of coaches, and in my opinion, and I've done it myself, is you have low numbers, and the first thing that you do is you pull in, you play backs against forwards. That's all you do. You play backs against forwards, or you pull in a wee set of goals and you play out to the 45 or out to the 65, and your pitch is so condensed. And hey, if you want a wee bit of intensity and plenty of rucks, no problem. That'll definitely happen in that area. But to me, in order to get the strike, which is so important in hurling and really opening up the shoulders, it's important to use the full length of the field when we can. And I think what you've done there by bringing in the sidelines encourages that. Get your players playing, and then it also it allows you to, if you wanted to in your session, to work on sidelines as well. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Because in sometimes cases they maybe don't even do that. But I think using the full length is a great way. But as you say, pulling in the sidelines is masterful. But then again, as you also say, you do want to play with a bit of width as well. So opening up the pitch as well, that way works a treat too. I think it's also good too that players get used to. If you keep playing very small-sided games, you're never going to get used. If you're playing corner back or you're playing corner forward, you're never going to get used to the ball coming from the far half-back line. It's always going to be wee short passes, which I'm not saying there's anything wrong with. But in the game, your opponent might not even be playing like that. They might be throwing everything long, so you want to be ready for it. And there's a different way of working on your first touch and judging the flight of the ball if the ball's coming from 90 yards compared to coming from 30 yards.
Super, Kevin. With the backs and forwards, you know, my favourite there is that I have the poles out 3/4 ways down the field, and I have a goalie down in the far goals. Okay, he's not going to get any shots at him, and you'll vary the goalie now. So his puck outs, there'll be normal puck outs. So you know your defenders that are looking down at him, they're going to get normal ball. Now sometimes I'll shout to that goalie to come out maybe to the 21 or to the 30-yard line. So instead of dropping a puck out which might normally go on the half back line or midfield area, now it's going on the inside line. So you're trying to replicate a match as best you can, and you're trying to replicate the kind of ball that will come in. So if you take your goalie pucking from the square, well, obviously that replicates standard puck outs. If you bring your goalie out and say, right, the next few balls puck him from 30 yards out the field, well, they're like balls that are coming in general play from a half back line on the other end of the field, and those can go in around the square, they can go to the corners, and you're replicating a real match as much as you can. Okay, so just to move it on, I mentioned already there about planning your pitch as best you can, especially if you have 4 or 5 different activities coming on. And this is a great way of introducing a helper or a new coach. You're kind of mentoring the coach, and you know, if you have 2 equal coaches, well, maybe you share the load. Damien does the first few drills there and sorts himself out, and then Kevin comes in and does a few, and then I do my few, and we're well organised. So, you know, all of those little things make sense. Or somebody that's learning the ropes, you know, they'll gather up the cones for you, they'll put them out for you. They might keep an eye on a little mini game there, which is not too hard. And little by little, they're also learning the ropes, okay? So that does make sense. Now, the next question, I suppose, is what to coach. And this kind of brings me back, and we touched on this on one of the workshops there, improving your team. One year in particular, I recorded the scores of every match that we played in. And we won 14 and we lost 13. Now, when I looked in a little bit closer, I discovered that we lost 6 of those games by less than 4 points, which means 6 games were lost by either 3, 2, or 1 point. And I said to myself, Jenny, you know, every one of those games could have been won. Now, I said on the other workshop, we zoned in on this a lot more in a lot more detail. Some of you were on that workshop. But you're basically saying to yourself, what loses those games? So the coming year, then, we're going to try not to lose those games. Okay, we're trying not to lose any of them, but the games that were lost by more than 4 points, well, they could have been 24 points, and maybe we hadn't the hope of winning them anyway. But you never know. So what do we need to zone in on to bridge that gap and improve our team? Well, again, that's where you start. That's where you start. Our 7 essentials. Work on those. Every single one of those, your team can improve on it. And without having seen any of your teams, I guarantee you, if I had your players for 6 coaching sessions, they'd be striking longer after the 6 if we did long striking for 10 minutes every single night. I guarantee you they'll be striking longer. And I guarantee you, some of your players that are a little bit weak on one side, they will be better on it. Catching, you know, each of those skills. 2 of the skills that a lot of coaches don't bother working on, hooking and blocking. So if you were to do hooking and blocking once in every 4 nights of training, how many points is that going to help you? How many scores less will you concede? Well, I guarantee you, it's definitely going to be 3 or 4 points a game. So this again is where you start. Now, they're what we might call the standard skills. Then a little list of them there, we call them the not so obvious ones. And they're hard to, I suppose, you know, sometimes they're hard to picture, they're hard to say, right, how do we work on these things, right? Some of them are straightforward enough. Fitness is so important for youths and adults, and maybe more important for adults, because people, when they get into adulthood, maybe they're not on the field, they're not in the field as much as they used to be, and some of them are going to lose shape, and for some reason or other, a lot of lads tend to throw on a few pounds when they get over the 19 or 20 year mark, and that can be a problem. Now, fitness in itself, it's a separate area. Shooting comes under striking, speaks for itself. reaction. You know, how are your players reacting to the ball? Are they slow to react? Kevin is slower than me, right? I know in a sprint there I'm faster than him. But how is he getting to the ball before me every time? How is this happening? Because he's reading the game. He's reading the ball. He's looking up the field. And he sees the way a lad is shaping. And he says, well, that ball is not going off to the right. It's looking like it's coming left. And he's already on the way. And I'm wondering where he's gone. Can you coach it? Of course you can. Not fouling. That's a huge skill. Now, if Damien Coleman was on tonight, I'd be getting him to tell us all about how the Galway lads learn to foul and learn to foul well and not getting caught in that. But down our way, I'm not so sure how your guys do it above in Derry, Kevin, but our lads try not to foul. So, picking up breaks, can you coach it? Of course you can coach it. You know, I have often heard lads saying, Jay, we lost, but we would have won the whole match, only the other boys won the breaks, as if it was a lottery. But it's not a lottery. You win the breaks by being in for the breaks. Work rate, positional play. You know, when to go tight, when to go loose. They're important. How do you learn those things? In a game. Killing a ball instead of striking it, instead of lashing on a ball, put the hurl on it, keep your opponent from moving it. Little things like that. Kevin, do you want to come in on any of those there? And I have another little list of them here. I'll just flick from one to the other if you want to pick out a few of them to emphasise them.
I would say, Martin, the one, I don't know if it's the old defender in me, but I think it's the one about the not fouling and you taking the sessions. And I don't know, I'd be questioning, I'd love to know from the coaches on what they think about it, but when you're running your session, and Martin, going back to your time with Kilkenny and often the stories about Cody never blowing a whistle and stuff like that there, but I often wonder then, when you see, like, we have coaches here that would be doing a session and they wouldn't be blowing fouls and boys would maybe be tearing lumps out of each other, and then it comes to a match and then Jesus, they're giving away fouls. And now I'm not saying you're coming up against boys like Murphy that's juking out from goals and sticking over points from his own 45 or whatever, but like the scoring zone now, you mentioned earlier on with the lighter slitter, the scoring zone now, particularly for free takers, has got so big. And I don't understand why we don't do more stuff around good tackling within our session. So that starts back again at two of your magnificent sevens, the hooking and blocking and getting them done right. But making sure that we're emphasising not trying to foul or give away, particularly not giving away in very scoreable positions. That would be two that I'd be saying is, you them down there is not so obvious, but Jesus, all you'd have to do is sit and watch a match and you'd soon see the amount of scores that are coming from frees or the number of shots that are coming from frees. And trying to cut that down would be a major for me.
Super for that, Kevin. Just on the myth, I suppose, about Brian not blowing the whistle. That was true. He didn't blow it, but what people didn't realise was the reason. And the reason the whistle wasn't blown was, let's say you had 35 minutes for your game. Well, you wanted the game to be for 35 minutes. And if you start blowing whistles and taking frees, you're probably going to lose 10 of those minutes at least. Now, but what was done was the fouls were called. So the whistle wouldn't blow, wouldn't stop the play, but the fouls were called. Jimmy, you have the hand on the back. You're after Mikey, you're after tapping the hurl. You're holding his arm. And they were called out and the players were told in uncertain terms, you cut out that kind of stuff. So, you know, unless there was a real stupid foul that needed the game to be stopped and a guy really balled out, you played on. But you absolutely pointed out the fouls because, you know, there's no point in cutting yourself. Because you come to the game and you've mentioned it, Kevin, you know, if you're not used to hearing that whistle blown or not being picked up on the fouls, and then you made a referee is blowing them and you're going to be beaten on frees alone. So that makes a lot of sense. You know, another few not obvious ones, and maybe they are obvious, would say puck outs, frees and line balls. You have the ball in those occasions. So that's not easy, but we should be able to give ourselves at least a 10% advantage with those balls. You know, and it's when you puck a ball out, even though your goalkeeper has the ball, it's actually easier to defend it than actually win it. So, you know, that's not simple. Frees, again, if they're not going over the bar, you should be able to play them to some advantage of your own players. Line balls, sometimes I nearly wish we didn't win a line ball. I nearly wish the opponents won it, because especially in the backs, if you win a line ball in your backs, you're down a man straight away. And the most important thing is that you don't take that line ball and hit it to the loose man. I think it's more important for backs to be good cuts, good at line balls than forwards. There are a few that can cut them over the bar, but most of those go wide and they're puck outs and they end up on your own 21. But a good line ball striker in the backs is essential, that you can actually get that ball out of the danger area. You having a line ball now as a corner back, that is dangerous, because again, it's much easier to defend it. Guys against you, they knock it down and suddenly they're in on goal. So Kevin has mentioned the tackling there. Okay, you can read the rest of them, a few other little areas there that might be worth looking at. 2 up for the same ball, that's a big problem. And that's something you need to work on. Now, just moving it on. And excuse me now, I'm sucking a swear here just to keep the throat from drying up on me. This is an interesting couple of slides, and we fired these out, Kevin, above at your conference there in Ulster a couple of years ago. We're looking at a training session, and I think it's fair to say 90% of us on tonight would say, right, when we have our players, what do we do with them? Well, we spend a certain amount of time on skills and drills. We spend a bit of time on tactics and analysis. We spend a bit of time talking or bring in somebody's psychology, ourselves or somebody else. We certainly spend time on fitness. We spend time on condition games or mini games, and we spend time on the formal match. I think they are, by and large, the components of a training session. Okay, now, which of those you give priority to, and how much time you allocate to each of those areas is hugely important. How much time are your players given to hurling or camogie in the week? That's going to be hugely determined by where you live, whether you're a dual club, whether your players are dual players. So you got to balance it out and say, right, for example, I would imagine up in Kevin's country where most of the players are dual players. Well, I'd say when I have those guys for hurling, they don't need any S&C because they're kicking football anyway as well, and they're probably out almost every night of the week. So fitness is not going to be an issue there. So I'd be saying straight away, I'd be given little or no time there. Now, if you're down in my county and the boys are only by and large in most of the summer, they're only playing the one game, well, maybe they're not in the field as often. Maybe they do need a little bit of work on fitness. The whole tactics end of it, the psychology end of it, the skills and drills, these are important. Now, this one, I would say to you is, how are you approaching the skills level of it? Do you actually know how skillful your players are or how skillful they're not? For underage, and Kevin has a different title on this, I think he calls it an assessment, but whatever you call it, for underage, I like a kind of a formal skills test from time to time, or an assessment that the player challenges him or herself. How far can I strike it right, left? How many can I pick up? Jab lift, roll lift, etc. And with view to improving. That I know the distance I can strike. And I go off and I practice, and hopefully in a month's time, I'll be able to do better. Now, that's for underage. Underage, I like a written one of some description, maybe little prizes, etc. With your adults and with your later youths, I think there should be a skills test done every night by you, the coach, in your eye. Informally, you're looking out at your drills, you're looking out at your game, and you are analysing very, very minutely where your players are at. Wow, a few of my players, they're not able to strike both sides, or they're only 50% of the strength on their weak side. Okay, some of my players, they're not able to hand pass the ball 20 metres, or they're dropping ball. That you look at all those skills and you note the deficiencies, either write them down or note them in your head, and then you get after them the next night in training. I think that does make sense. Kevin, do you want to chip in on those areas again? Just, you know, these skills, these areas making up a lot of your training.
Yeah, no, I've already, you're right. I talk about this an awful lot, and I was referred to it as the skill assessment. And I was actually looking at it whenever we were talking about the underage sessions. That's something that was very, very important for coaches and a club in particular to do, because I thought it was a great thing to set up within a club with a team, that if you had a certain number of wee skills that you wanted to make sure the players were proficient at, and in particular, as you mentioned there, being able to do things on both sides. So to me, I was sitting there looking at it going, wouldn't it be a great thing at the end of the season to be passing on? And I suppose we're coming into youth and adult here as well. So take an under 15 or an under 17 player that's just about to leave under 17 now and go up into adult level. If his coach was able to pass on to the senior coach or the adult coach and say, look, there's Martin Fogarty, and he's first class at going down through, you know, striking off his right side, grounding the right side, but his left side's a wee bit weak and he needs to be worked on it, or he needs to be pushed on it, or something maybe around catching the ball, or any of the other skills in particular. And again, Martin, what you've up there, I think it's as simple as that. There's a number of great resources out there. We done a wee vodcast series there over this last number of months, and one of them focused completely in around skills assessment. And coaches can log on to it on the YouTube page and get loads of it. But we picked up resources from a number of clubs around the country, and in particular we were using the one that Brian set up in Kilkenny. It was a great, actually to me, it's a lovely resource to take as a club or a team, take away and then change it around to suit your own needs. And no, like you're putting that up, there's a sheet up there where you've got enough there. Coaches could just take a wee picture of that with their phone, take it away with them and use it. And then as the time goes on, they can adapt it, make it harder, make it easier, whatever they need. The reason we were saying about the skill assessment was, again, based around not that there was a pass or fail in it, but more there's somebody that's proficient and there's somebody that needs to work on it. And it was to pass it on to the next team the next year. Again, a way you talked at the beginning about planning and reviewing. So if I was the coach and you were passing on your players to me, the first thing I'd be doing is reviewing where they're at. And then my plan would basically focus around what we need to work on, which would be their deficiencies and what I want them to try and do. So to me, it's a great resource, and I don't understand why a lot more people don't use it. The other wee thing about it too, probably coming away from it, is you're asking players to do a wee bit in their own time. Sure, a skills test or skill assessment is the perfect thing. So if you were to say to them, look, how far can you strike the ball? Sure, all they can do is go down to the pitch during the week and practice on it and come back to you and say, oh, I'm able to strike the ball now up to 70 yards.
Super, Kevin. And, you know, it's so important. I've got a couple of players in my mind, and no, you're always, as a coach, you're trying to tell a player how he or she can improve. And I have a player in my mind, a real good player, young, and you know, not huge, but I've been saying to him, look, you're playing there maybe corner back or wing back, and you have a decent strike, but if you could strike the ball 20 yards longer, look at the difference. You're in corner back, you're winning ball, he's very good at winning ball, very good at tackling, and you're clearing. Now at the moment, if you're clearing from corner back, your clearance is going to the other half back line. Now if you go about 20 yards on that, and that clearance could go over the half back line, look at the difference that'd make. Their half backs won't get it, and your inside forward line have a chance of getting it. So if you could add 20 metres to your stroke over the period of a year or 2 years, look at the difference it would make. And I've seen this happen several players in my experience over a period of time. I've seen players come in at county level, and by the time they left, they had added 20 or 30 metres to their stroke. And what a difference it made. Another player, maybe I have another player in mind, and strong and very accurate and fit everything, but inclined to drop a few balls. You know, just inclined to. So again, you say, look at, you're doing so well, but you know, if you could drop instead of dropping 5 balls in a game, if you only drop 2, look at the difference that could make. Because that can be a chance of a goal sometimes. Now, how do you do it? How do you sort it? Well, it's personal. You get out against a wall and you work. Or in the 10 or 15 minutes before training starts, you get out with your friend there and you start hopping balls at each other and handling it. It's really quite simple. Players look at the areas they need to work on and actually work on it. Another player is missing a few rises in a match. You go work on it. There's actually no rocket science to it. Okay, is there 1 or 2 questions there, Kevin, at this point in time, or will we drive on to the end?
No, Martin, they've sort of all been covered. There was one that was just come up at the end there, which actually goes into your last 2 slides there. And it was, I think you've sort of half answered it. Could you not include your fitness and reaction into the main session, say within your drills?
Yeah, for sure. The thing about reaction is it's actually highlighting it. You know, we have so many coaches and they're grand for doing ordinary structured stuff. They can come up with as many drills as you or me have come up with, and that's grand. However, when they're standing on the sideline, maybe they're not seeing things that are supposed to be obvious. And a lot of the best coaching, in my opinion, is done from the sideline in your in-house training game, where I'm watching Kevin, and let's say he's wing forward, and the ball is dropping in on the centre forward, centre back, and Kevin's man has gone in, and he's picking the break and clearing it. And I'm saying, Kevin, you should have been gone in there. So I'll slip down along the sideline. I've already mentioned it to Kevin, and I say, right, here's the ball is dropping down in the centre forward. Kevin, go. That's what I might say. Just a little jolt to him. That's what I'm talking about. Go. Run in front, run in behind, and see will that ball break for you. So, you know, the other little one we mentioned there, getting out in front of the man. So I'm in corner back, and I've developed a bad habit of staying behind my man. Kevin is my coach, and he's pointed it out to me. But pointing it out is one thing, but getting me to do it is another thing. Now, if he slips down near me during the training game and he sees a ball about to come down in my area, and he might little shout, Martin, go. Well, Jesus, suddenly, oh yeah, that's what you meant. I go and I get the ball. And he says, that's what I'm talking about. Now, if I didn't go, my opponent, the corner forward, he gets out first, he picks the ball, and unless I'm good at blocking or hooking, he scores. So that's kind of incidental coaching. What we're going to move on there now, folks, is we sent you out there the link to the skills and drills and games that we put up there on the YouTube. We asked you to look at them in advance in case they don't run properly for you tonight. But I think this Microsoft live event, as opposed to the ordinary Teams meeting, there's a slight delay in the presentation. What we're doing here takes about 30 seconds to get to you. I think it's known as streaming. And I think that helps a lot of the video issue. So I think most of you that have reasonable internet coverage should see these fairly all right. But anyway, it doesn't matter if you don't, because you can log on in your own time and look at them. Now, we had about 25 different skills and drills on that video, and to me, they all make sense. They're all the kind of stuff I would be using, but they're voiced over. But I just want to, as the lad says, hone in on a few of them. Actually, now that I think of it, I'm going to stop sharing just for 1 second, because there was a little button I was supposed to tick, and I'm not so sure I ticked it. So we'll just try again here now. I was thinking that. One little button can make all the difference. Now, you seeing things all right there, Kevin?
I just see the 2 lads in the field now, Martin.
Yeah, that's grand. That's grand. Okay.
Striking is one of the key skills of the game, and there are so many different types of strike that you just probably need to work on some element of it in every training session. So here we have the players striking right and left at various distances, and various types of striking. Striking to the hand, striking to the feet, popping the ball on the ground. You can just build it up over a period of time that they're getting experience at all levels of striking. Moving towards the ball, slipping to the side before they strike the ball are also little skills that should be built into your training. So here we have the players moving towards the ball as they would in a game, because if they don't, their opponent is going to get the ball before them. Players are now working on long striking. This is an essential skill also, that you strike the ball as far as you can, and built into that is catching. So players are working on striking as far as they can, getting a good position, catching the ball and returning it. This is a variation on long striking where two players are working together. One catches the ball and hand passes to his partner, and his partner then drives it as far as he can down the field. It works on teamwork, it works on vision, it works on laying a ball off to your teammate when you're under pressure yourself. Again, I would like these players to be striking longer.
Okay, folks, you don't need any degree in hurling to set up what we've been looking at there, and I've started off with striking because I just think it's so important. So Kevin, I just going to ask you to come in there. You know, those players, guys, they could be anywhere from Kerry to Antrim, from Wexford to Donegal. They could be from anywhere, and as I said, there's no, you don't need any degree in setting up what they're doing. It's basically one opposite one. Kevin, do you want to come in there with maybe a few comments on what they're doing, or what we should be doing, or why we might recommend coaches to actually do this kind of stuff? Because, you know, as you can see, it's pretty basic stuff. So if you'd like to come in there on that, Kevin. Yeah,
just a couple of things I would mention on, Martin, is it is basic stuff. There's no doubt in that. But the basics need to be done right. And it's normally when you come to the biggest day and something goes wrong, it'll be then when the person goes, oh, he missed the ball, or he got his touch wrong, or we went to strike the ball into the far corner and it dropped short on top of a sweeper and he set it up and there was a score at the far end of the field. So there's your strike and letting you down. I'm just picking up on something that you had mentioned earlier on about taking about 10 minutes every session. I was taking the county Celtic Challenge team there for the last couple of years before the COVID. And in their first session, we'd have a wide bad habit here in some clubs where they go out and all they do is strike the ball between the 21 and the end line. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but we all know you need to strike the ball a lot further than that. So you can become very proficient at striking the ball 20 yards. But what you really want to be doing is trying to see, can you open up the shoulders and get the ball going? But not like a low enough ball flight, direct ball flight, and see how far you can get it to go. And Martin, we kept it very simple, very similar to what you just said there. And within our warm-up, we covered most of the Magnificent Seven skills, and we had the players striking in pairs the width of the field. And that's all I asked them to do. And you can probably guess, Martin, over the first few weeks, the striking wasn't great and players were having to run maybe the middle of the halfway to get the ball to take it back to strike it. But Jesus, do you know, after about 7, 8 sessions of it, their striking really did improve. And it's one of the things that I was very impressed with them, within the two teams over the 2 years, was their striking was excellent by the time it was done. That was by no masterful coaching. That was just by players doing good repetition and trying an exercise that they weren't doing enough of anyway.
So for Kevin, and you see, folks, what you're looking at there is the challenges that players have in a match. And that's one of their challenges, you know, to strike the ball. Now, the great thing about some of these skills is they're going twos. So if you're striking, well, if they're going high, you're working on striking and catching. If they're going low, you're working on striking and first touch. And your challenge as a coach is to bring those simple exercises to match level. I can go out there in the morning and I can puck a ball around at a nice handy pace, grand, and then enjoy it, but it's not going to, it's not going to survive. I won't survive in a game doing that. So if I want to get into a game, I have to start learning to drive that ball real fast, real hard, real accurate. I have to be twisting and turning when I'm striking. Sometimes I have to be running more times, and I have to replicate the game. Now, the long striking that Kevin is talking about, I have seen it 1,000 times. Exactly what Kevin has said. All the striking 20 metres, and that's an important strike, but it's only one of several. Now, you can look at it in your own time again, but those players you're looking at were Kilkenny development squads under 16s, I think, or 17s. And this is the first time some of those were asked to strike long as you can strike it. I could have stopped it and called them in and got them to do it again, but I said, no, we'll leave it as it is because that's reality. But if I stopped it and called them in, I would have said to them, lads, those balls weren't travelling long, not by a long shot. And I'd say, why? Because several of you were holding your hurl short for a start. More of you were striking from a standing position instead of being like a goalie that wants to land that ball 100 metres down the field. So if we had time to stop them and go at them again, they would have improved. But these are the things you need to do, is look at those day in, day out skills of the game and get them better and better and better. And as we said on the child workshop, with each individual skill, you get it right first. And that might be in slow motion. Then you get it fast, faster and faster, and then under pressure. So you could take that striking in twos there, and you could have a player coming to a ball and maybe an opponent 5 metres behind him. And there's your pressure. So I have to go to this ball now and pick it and strike it. But Kevin is coming 5 metres behind me. So if I'm not gone at full speed, he's going to get me. And that's the difference in, I suppose, your players ending up as good hurlers or ending up as middling hurlers.
Striking.
Now,
Martin, just before you play the next video, a wee add on to that there from John here on the question box. And he's asking, is doing a drill incorporating 2, 3 or 4 of the basic skills a good idea as it can save time, or is it better to concentrate on one skill at a time? Now, John's just highlighting that he coaches an adult team.
Yeah, what you're looking at, as I just said there, most of them incorporate 2 or 3 skills anyway. You know, if I'm working on hand passing, but the guy I'm hand passing it to is catching, well, hopefully he's catching. If not, he's dropping it. And that's why he needs to work on his catching. So most of them are working on at least 2. And of course, if you can incorporate 2 or 3 different skills, brilliant, ideally, if you can. And look at guys and girls, it's a little bit of sitting down sometime and thinking out and saying, right, let's look at the game and let's fire in a little section of that game as a drill, and away we go. And if it works well, keep it. And if it doesn't work well, get rid of it. And I'd have the same old skills and drills for the last 30 years, and I'll never change them. And this one that is coming up next, I'd never change it, because to me, this one coming up is just up there at the top, important. And it's basically working on first touch. That's the first reason. But it's also working on striking. But it's also working on fitness, if you really do it properly. And it's working on evasion, twisting and turning. And if I wanted to really make this hard, I'd put an opponent coming in after the guy that's gone to the ball. And I might even put him back 10 yards. I'd put him back 15 yards. And you would find and see the guy that's gone out to the ball, if he makes the slightest error, a lad will make up 15 yards on him. So that's, yeah, for certain with that one, Kevin. So just tune in on this one now. And I have it voiced over, which is grand, but I'm also going to ask Kevin just to look at it again and either emphasize what I've said, or, you know, just zone in on a couple of little points he might see in this that are important.
Players in this exercise are attempting to run at maximum speed, collect a ball that is moving to them at pace, and without breaking stride, deliver the ball right down to the far end of the field. It's extremely difficult. Just one little error and the drill will break down. In a game, if a player doesn't go at top speed to the ball, his opponent will get there before him. If his touch lets him down, his opponent will win the ball. And if he slows down to strike.
Okay, Kevin, simple little one there. Do you want to harp on that?
I think the couple of wee points that I would pick up on it is, I love the way that you keep emphasising this drill as the drill that picks half the Kilkenny teams that you were working with. And I'm actually obsessed with, you call it there, first touch 3 opposite 3. In my head, it's actually called the Jackie Turrell drill because you keep emphasising it. But the one thing that you mentioned in it, it's about top speed, going to the ball and working on your touch. And I suppose we as coaches have probably set that drill up, or it's a version of it numerous times. But do we emphasise them 2 key points all the time? Because I'm sure as a player, you can go through the motions as much as you want, tutter out to the ball, win the ball, take 2 or 3 touches at it, lift it and strike it. But are you going to get that opportunity when it comes to the match? More than likely not. And the 2 points that you were emphasising there was going top speed to the ball and working on your touch. And I would say if you were doing it and you were doing it fast, surely it's going to, eventually you're going to get it.
Yeah, Kevin, 100% there. And folks, if you get a chance to look back on it, in the first few seconds of that, the players that were doing it very well. They were getting out to it. You know, and again, you're going back to Declan there. You're getting a couple of skills into one there. You know, the rising, the striking, the movement. In the earlier part of it there, the guys were actually very good. But if you look to the last little bit here that we were looking at, you'll notice the last player came out. He wasn't going at full speed. He slowed down to pick it and strike it. And it looked grand to the ordinary eye, it looked grand. But if you were the coach on the sideline, you'd say, hold on a second now, lads. Fast forward that now to an important match next Sunday. And if that player, let him be a wing back or a corner back or a wing forward or a corner forward, if he goes out there at 60% pace to the ball, he's having the hope of getting it. Opponent will have it. If he stops to strike it, he hasn't a hope of clearing it. And you know what Kevin is alluding to there is we often up around his counties there, we're often doing this kind of stuff live, and we mentioned maybe, you know, the typical cornerback, let it be Jackie Tyrrell or Jackie whoeverybody coming out to that ball, and he's marking, let it be Owen Kelly or Lar Corbett or Shamie Cummins. But if he's not gone absolute like a rocket, that forward is going to have it. And then it's only a matter of whether the forward decides to tap it over the bar or take him on. And another little thing we do just to, you know, we've often put players out doing that little drill and we'd stop them and say, well, lads, what you think? And, you know, they thought they were grand. But then we'd say, well, you know, okay, we didn't come up here to be nice to you. It could be a county squad. It could be, as Kevin says there, it could be a Celtic Challenge squad. And we'd say, well, it actually wasn't good enough, lads, you know. And we'd have a bit of fun then. And we put a player out and we say, right, your task now, Martin, is that ball is going to be played to you. You have to go to that at full speed, collect it and drive it up the field. But Kevin there is coming after you and he's going to be 50 yards behind. And I'm backing Kevin because I'm telling you, Martin, you're either going to go slowly to the ball or your touch will let you down or you'll miss the rise. And I guarantee you no pressure on you, but you won't make it. And we have a bit of fun. And off we go. And 9 times out of 10, the player running at top speed from 50 yards away will get up and keep the player from striking the ball. And, you know, there's 2 lessons in that. There's the lesson in the player that's going for the ball just has to be going max and the touch has to be spot on. But the other lesson is the player that found himself 50 yards behind, if you really chase with intent, with savage intent, there's a very, very good chance that you'll run down that player. Now, if you don't run him down, what you will force is you'll force that player to deliver that ball immediately. He won't have time to set up, steady the feet and maybe take on a nice handy shot for a score, or he won't have time to set up and wait for the forward inside to make a move and give them this lovely ball. You'll be putting on that pressure that makes the difference over a period of a game of maybe 3 or 4 points. Okay, so we'll move on from this one. Now, this is kind of going back there to Kevin. Somebody asked a question about a couple of drills, a couple of skills in a drill, and there was something else come up there earlier. So, going to show this little exercise. I call it diagonals is the one that's coming up, and normally, you know, if we had microphones on and all that, I'd ask you to see, right, what are we working on in this? So if you get a chance, folks, even though I'm voice overing it, if you get a chance, just put 1 or 2 things in the text box there that you see. But I'll also ask Kevin, maybe, you know, even though he has seen it before, just to point out a few of the things that we're working on. So again, what I'm saying is a drill with a purpose. There has to be a purpose in it. You're throwing this out to your players. You have to say, Mary, Geraldine, Michael, here's why we're doing this. You know, this is something you're going to need in a certain part of the game. Here's why we're doing it. All right. So, as the lad says, roll it there, Colette.
This is a very difficult exercise that works on striking, catching, hand passing, support, and timing the run. Ideally, the players are moving at maximum speed to replicate a game. However, it is not as easy as one might think, and the slightest mistake will result in the drill breaking down. In a game, that generally amounts to losing possession or missing a scoring opportunity. 7 players is the ideal number for this exercise. It will not be suitable for players that haven't mastered the art of striking, catching, handling a ball. So you can see from this exercise that depending on the level of ability your players have, whether you decide to do it or not. There are some variations into the same exercise, initially running straight down the field. Then a variety can be the attacking players run diagonally across in front of the player with the slitter. Again, trying to replicate situations that might arise in a game. The player in the centre can knock down the ball, and on this occasion the players are working on getting in for a break, raising the ball, continuing on, and maybe even taking a score. If you have 14 players, ideally you'd set up 2 grids. If you have 21 players, you set up 3 grids so that players are getting plenty of activity and not standing around too much.
Okay, actually, Kevin, the one have texted up there because the want of time. We're 30 seconds ahead of the people. So
funny, there's a few coming in here, Martin. There is. I've got a couple up for you.
All right, but they're fast then. Yeah.
You're right. So you've got most of them keeping it now simple down to one skill, as in with striking, with catching, raising, hand passing, shooting.
Yep, we sure have. Any yourself there, Kevin, that you'd like to add to it?
No, it's funny. I'm just going to come in after this one. That John had made a point here at the end here, says the touch is letting them down, plus some hand passing is not right and could be pulled up as a free. So I'm sitting there looking at it going, like, a lot of it's down. Obviously, there's a bit of the diagonal ball, as you're saying, but it's the timing of the run. And more importantly, the players' reactions when it does break down. Because as you mentioned a number of times, it is going to break down within that drill. So it's how do they react? Are they just going to throw the head up, or are they going to turn and get the ball and get the thing moving again? But what I liked about it was it was a basic drill. Well, basic, it might be a wee bit advanced, but it's working towards game Pacific work. So you could have that scenario where you have two wing half forwards, one's in the ball, one doesn't the ball, plays the full forward the ball, and next of all, one of them's coming through to take the return and try and score a goal. that actually also could be the ball coming down on top of your centre half back or your midfielder, and one of the wing backs or somebody coming off the shoulder again for the support to collect the ball. And the one thing that I liked very much was, do you remember in the middle, it was near the end of it, where the guys come in to shoot in the goalkeeper, but it was the guy who shot, but who followed up on the shot. To me, I was like, that's a great emphasising going, just because you made your pass to that man, your job's not finished there. You need to be continuing up because anything could happen, which was the keeper parried the ball down and the man was in like a rocket to try and put it in the net.
Yeah, for sure, Kevin. There's a huge amount in it. What I want to say first there, in case I forget to say it after, what's very important with all drills is that there aren't any players standing around. Now, in that there, we had too many because it's only for the camera. But you want to watch your drills and have as few players as possible in them so that players are getting maximum amount of ball, unless that's a very, very severe drill where they need rest time. So watch it. Sometimes you could have, if you have 6 players in a line, you'd be as well off to put it into 2 trees and away you go, because you're getting the ball in every tree. Now, if it's severe, different ball game, you need enough recovery time. So just be mindful of that. Now, as Kevin has said there, you know, you can take that little drill there as being, you know, a ball in the field in so many different positions, all dropping down and away you go. And I suppose Kevin said there, one of them could be a ball dropping on a centre forward and a centre back, and maybe you have wing forwards or maybe you have midfielders running on the flank. So I just jotted down there one night, and I just have it here. In no particular order, all the little components of a game that are being worked on there. And Kevin has mentioned most of them: striking, passing, hand passing, timing the run. That's a big one. When to go, when not to go. If you run in too soon for a ball, you're bringing an opponent with you. So if you go too early, you're dragging an opponent in and there's just going to be a big mullock. Whereas if you time your run, take your time and then go. But when you're going, you have to be able to go at full speed. Now, if you don't go at full speed, you're dragging an opponent with you and he or she is going to take that ball anyway. So you time it so you're gone like a rocket. Chasing in, Kevin mentioned it. Finishing, you know, the guy with the ball is trying to finish it. We're also working the keeper. Kevin mentioned it, which is one of the hardest things to work on, is the follow-in player. Some of the greatest scores ever are got not by a striker. They're got by the follow-in player. A ball is saved and someone following in. And sometimes that follow-in has to come from maybe 40 metres out. That is difficult. That's what real work rate is called. The breaking ball, Kevin mentioned it. Yeah. Fitness. You know, we often do a little workshop on fitness with the ball, and that would be one of the drills we'd use. Now, we'd probably pull the cones farther back. The cones in that case were the guy standing in the middle, the 4 cones that were all about 15 metres away from the centre cone. But if we double that space, you'll get serious fitness work in one of those. Again, it has to be done at pace. Decision making is being worked on there, right? Raising the ball. Because one of those elements there was where the middle player knocks the ball onto the ground. So in that case, the players coming onto it were reading the break and raising the ball. And also, decision making, right? Is it my ball or is it Kevin's ball? The two of us are coming onto it. One of us has to make a shout very, very quickly, either your ball or my ball. So pile of stuff in that. Okay, I'll just move on to maybe 1 or 2 more, and then we'll open it up for any questions you might have, folks. Okay. Now, moving on here now, we'll say to games with a purpose. Now, apart from the formal games, and again, you can look through the video, the clips on YouTube there. We have all kinds of little games on them. I've chosen this one next because it covers what I referred to earlier there, a component of the game that my team, for example, needs to work on. So my fictitious team, we've got a couple of problems. First one is we're shooting when we shouldn't shoot. You know, we're shooting from impossible angles. We're shooting maybe when there's a defender probably going to block us or hook us. And when you do that, the result is normally a puck out because you get a wide or a clearance. So there's a problem. The next problem my fictitious team, I better say, have is that they really don't work. You know, Billy will go to the first lad that beats him and he might go to the second, but he won't go to the third. In a game, the team that wins, you know, it's like a boxer. You're in there for 10, 12 rounds and you're just waiting and waiting. And when your opponent drops his guard, bang, you floor him. So it's when you drop your guard in hurling by being lazy that you give that opponent the bit of time, the bit of space to finish the ball. So that's what we're working on. Now, in the middle of all that, needless to say then, we're working on the essential skills of rising, hand passing, covering a loose man, blocking, hooking, everything is in here. The one thing about this drill is, again, there are too many people in it. Ideally for this, and maybe I overvoice it, ideally you want 12 players. There's going to be 4 working, 2 blacks and 2 blues at any given time. The rule is simple. The coach will roll the ball to one player. So let's say he rolls it to the blue. The blues have possession. Before they attempt a shot, there has to be at least 1 hand pass. And the second rule is you're not to shoot unless the score is 80% on. Now, if the blacks turn it over, same rule. There has to be at least 1 hand pass before they attempt a shot. Now, in practice, there might be 20 hand passes before a shot is taken. Ideally, there'll be no shot got away. Ideally, it'll be stalemate because you have 2-on-2. There's no way in that situation a player should get free enough to have an easy shot. But what happens is someone backs down. Now, if I got that working for 20 seconds and there's no shot, I'd stop it and I'd say, brilliant lads, well done. That was max. I'm not going to leave him, flog him to death until someone can't run anymore and we get a free shot. Now, there's so many different variations on this that you can bring in extra players on the far side of the field, etc., etc. Again, replicating the match. So I'll just roll it on here for a moment.
This is another example of a difficult game that will not suit all players. Can be worked in a confined area and also in an open area. Players compete to shoot for a point. When in possession, the players are not to shoot unless the score is on. In other words, they don't waste the ball. When they are not in possession, they work hard to ensure that their opponents cannot get an easy shot. For variety, players can maybe be allowed to leave the box, or more players can enter the game from different parts of the pitch, again to replicate a match. 12 players is the ideal number to give those players enough work to keep them busy, however with sufficient recovery. Absolutely no fouling is permitted, as a foul in the game amounts to giving your opponent a handy point. In the example here, there are far too many players waiting for their turn, so ideally another coach would take half of those players up to another set of goals. With all of these exercises, if a player is deficient in rising the ball or hand passing the ball or striking the ball, you'll very, very quickly see that the drill doesn't work. So you've got to go back then to the essentials or the basics of striking and catching, rising and handling.
Okay, folks, you know, that little exercise will kill you. Kevin, if you want to make a few comments on it there, and while you're doing so, if anybody else wants to type in a little comment of any description, type away there, and I'll hand it to you there, Kevin, for a few moments, please.
I think you called it there. That exercise there would definitely kill you. You mentioned a few times during it, the recovery is the key. No player in the game in the modern game is going to be in that situation there for a minute or 2 minutes. It's not going to happen. It's going to be in there for a maximum of 20 seconds, and even that is probably long. But you're getting everything that you need to have there. I think it's an excellent drill game, whatever way you want to call it, to set up, because you're getting so much in it. You mentioned within it, the 12 players would be the key, would be the nice number for it. So you'd be getting like a 1-to-3 work to rest ratio, which would be perfect. But the one thing that really emphasizes when you're watching it back for the coaches again is the passing and movement. Like when players get tired, players will often make silly passes and silly moves, but it's the movement off the ball that's actually the key. So you'll see the player maybe make the pass and then run to get into a better position. And sometimes that position might not actually work out for them, but at least they're trying to do that. And I think that should be encouraged more than anything, more so than the players just passing the ball and thinking that's their job done.
Yep. Are there any notes in there, Kevin, on it?
None here, Martin.
Okay.
I obviously answered that too well.
yeah, you obviously did, Kevin. But you see, folks, you know, when you look at that, and again, bear in mind, these guys are Kilkenny under 16s or 17s. I'm quite sure several of them went on to play a minor for Kilkenny maybe after that. That little box that they were working in started on the 21-yard line. And it was, if you noticed, it was over beside the D. So, you know, it wasn't that far out from the goals. Now, straight away, if those players can't strike a ball unopposed over the bar from that box, what does it say? You know, if they can't strike the ball over the bar unopposed, 10 out of 10 from that box, straight away, you have a problem. Now, you bring that on a few levels then and they're opposed. If a player there can't hook, and I think at the very start, a player got a shot off, I'm not so sure whether it went over the bar or not, but if the guy that was after him was able to hook, he wouldn't have got the shot off. And in hurling, really and truly, a player should never, an opponent should never get a shot off, because, you know, with a hurl, you know, 3 meters in front of you, 3 meters behind you, you should be able to let her reach him for a block or reach him for a hook. If you fail on a pick there, as Kevin said, if you fail on a hand pass, that's the opening the other team wants. So again, the scenario you're looking at there arises in games every minute of the game. You have 2-on-2 or you have 3-on-3 or 1-on-1, and that's what we're looking at. Now, if you had 24 players, you'd have that working in 2 spots on the field. If you had 36 players, you'd have it working in 3 spots. Or you don't have to have 12 in an area if you only had 8, but I give them a little bit more rest. So you use your head on that. Now, normally when I'd have players resting, I'd like to have them actively resting, maybe passing the ball or something. But that one is so severe, I wouldn't be too worried if they're doing nothing in the rest, only getting rest. So again, a little skill, a little drill with a purpose. I just want to see what else. There's a pile of ones lined up here now, but we won't go through them all. Sorry, you know, you just see. Okay, right. These are all really games. Kevin, look at people. You can look at these on the YouTube yourselves, folks. The whole lot of them, and they're just various ones. The goalkeeper challenge is just one opposite one. It's a game that will suit under 4s and it'll suit inter-county seniors. I'd recommend it for trying to develop goalkeepers, you know, and play a little competition. Line up your players, you know, 1 versus 1, little set of goals. See, can your top forward beat your goalie, vice versa. Even if you have 30 players, you have 15 opposite 15, right? Away we go there for 30 seconds. How many scores can I get on Kevin and vice versa? Okay, now the Blues, right? You move up 1, so you have a different opponent. After 30 seconds, you move up another. So you're getting a little challenge against different people. Great little work in it. And all the other games then that we have on that just make sense from, you know, I'll just say, if I was gearing up for a 15 versus 15, right? For 10 minutes, I might say, okay, we have 30 players out in the field. We're going to go across the pitch into little poles, goals only, 5v5. So we have 3 little games there and there's 10 in each game. There's huge learning in that. You just imagine that, not to mention the fitness with the ball. But you know, we have 5v5, so you're going to have 4 players outfield against 4, working across the pitch, which is 80 to 90 metres wide, and away we go, and we're looking for goals. Huge amount of learning in that. It's very open, but sometimes in a real match, it's very open. Sometimes you might have only 4 players inside the 45-yard line, inside the 50-yard line. Other times you could have 40 players in there, well, fictitiously. So you got to train for every scenario. You got to play your little possession games in a shoebox. Sometimes maybe 20 by 20 metres, getting players used to that. And then equally so, you put your 6v6 players maybe from the end line out to the 50-yard line and seeking to keep ball in that area. So again, we've mentioned all that in some of those. So I'll just stop sharing here now, Kevin, and give people, take them a couple of seconds to see you stopping. And if they have a couple of questions, then sure we'll see can we field them. All right.